My husband hid his love child from me for 7 years. It almost broke me. Los Angeles, California. Secrets and lies. They're the kind of thing you expect in dramatic Hollywood movies, not in your own home. But life in Los Angeles is nothing if not full of twists, and mine felt like it was ripped straight from a bad soap opera. Just weeks before what was supposed to be our 12th wedding anniversary, my picture-perfect world came crashing down. My husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, dropped a bombshell so devastating I wasn't sure I'd survive it. In a city known for reinvention, I was left wondering if I even knew who I was anymore. I can still remember the day as if it were yesterday. It was one of those sticky, sweltering LA afternoons where the heat clings to your skin and every movement feels heavier. I was standing in our kitchen, a small but charming space filled with mismatched appliances and the faint smell of garlic from the spaghetti sauce simmering on the stove. The windows were cracked open, and the sound of kids playing basketball on the street drifted in, mixing with the distant hum of a lawn mower. Life felt so ordinary, so secure. My 3 kids were sprawled out in the living room, debating over which Disney movie to watch for the 50th time. And just as I paused to appreciate that fleeting moment of peace, my phone rang. My phone had been ringing more often than usual lately. At the time, I chalked it up to work stress. My husband was in the middle of a big project, and the calls, meetings, and late nights were piling up. He'd been distracted, distant even, but I figured it was temporary. After all, we'd been through rough patches before. I had no reason to doubt him. I answered the phone with a smile on my voice, balancing it between my ear and shoulder as I stirred the sauce. "Hey, babe," I said casually. "What's up? Aren't you supposed to be in that big meeting downtown?" The silence on the other end of the line was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Not the kind of silence you get when someone is thinking or distracted. This was heavy, oppressive, like the weight of his guilt was choking him before he could even form the words. My stomach knotted, a cold, sinking feeling washing over me as I clutched the phone tighter. "Are you okay? Did something happen?" I asked again, my voice tinged with panic. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, trembling. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, and I swear, in that moment, my heart knew. My mind didn't catch up right away, but deep down, I already knew whatever he was about to say would destroy me. And then the words came, halting and full of shame. "There's someone else. A child. She's 7 years old." At first, I didn't even process it. I blinked, the world around me going eerily still, as if time itself had paused to let the enormity of his words sink in. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He repeated it, and this time, his voice cracked. And just like that, the weight of his confession hit me like a freight train. 7 years. 7 years of lies. 7 years of sneaking around behind my back. 7 years of pretending to be the perfect husband while he was secretly playing daddy to a child I didn't even know existed. My hands began to tremble, the phone slipping from my grip as I clutched the counter for support. I could hear him still talking, trying to explain himself, but his words were drowned out by the roaring in my ears. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the kitchen floor, sobbing so loudly the kids came running to see what was wrong. When he came home that night, I was a storm waiting to explode. The moment he walked through the door, I let him have it. "How could you do this to me? To us?" I screamed, my voice echoing through the house. He didn't even try to deny it. He just stood there, looking like a man condemned, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red and puffy. "I didn't know how to tell you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to lose you." "Lose me?" I spat, the words laced with venom. "You've been lying to me for 7 years. Do you have any idea what you've done?" He reached for me, but I recoiled as if his touch would burn me. I wanted to hit him, to scream at him until I couldn't breathe, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But instead, I turned and walked away, slamming the door to our bedroom so hard the walls shook. For days, I could barely look at him. Every time he tried to talk to me, to explain himself, I either screamed at him or shut him out completely. The kids noticed, of course. My oldest, barely 11, asked me one night, "Are you and Dad going to get divorced?" The question broke me. I wanted to pack his bags and throw them onto the front lawn, to tell him to get the hell out of my life and never come back. But life isn't that simple, is it? We had 3 kids together, a mortgage, bills, a life that was so intricately intertwined I couldn't just walk away. And then there was the part of me, the small, infuriating part, that still loved him. I started therapy, first on my own and later as a couple. At first, it felt pointless. Every session felt like tearing open a wound that was barely beginning to scab over. I cried more in those first few weeks of therapy than I had in my entire life. And every time my husband tried to explain himself, to rationalize his actions, I wanted to scream. "It wasn't about her," he said one night, his voice thick with emotion. "I was trying to protect you. I didn't want to hurt you." "Protect me?" I snapped, my voice rising. "You didn't protect me. You protected yourself. Don't you dare try to make this sound noble." He hung his head, tears streaming down his face. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly drowned out by the overwhelming tide of anger and betrayal. And then there was her. The child. His daughter. The living, breathing reminder of everything he'd done. I couldn't stop thinking about her, imagining what she looked like. Did she have his eyes? His smile? Did she know about me? About our kids? He begged me to meet her, said it was the right thing to do. "She's just a little girl," he said. "She didn't ask for any of this." But how could I? How could I look at her and not see the destruction her existence had caused? How could I welcome her into my life when the mere thought of her made my stomach turn? Now, months later, I'm still trying to pick up the pieces. Some days, I think we might just make it. Other days, I wonder if I'd be better off walking away and starting fresh. So, Reddit, what would you do? Have you ever faced a betrayal this massive? Is there even a way to move forward, or am I just fooling myself? Let me know if you want updates. I'm still living this nightmare, but maybe, just maybe, there's a way out. This story now offers deeper details, background, and emotional complexity to match its extended length. Would you like further edits or additions? The truth is, I didn't know how to move forward. Each day felt like walking through quicksand, and every attempt to repair what had been broken seemed futile. I thought about the little girl constantly, but not with hatred or blame. How could I? She didn't ask for this, didn't choose to be born into a situation so tangled and toxic. But knowing that didn't make it easier to accept her presence in my life, or the fact that my husband had spent years playing dad to her while keeping her existence a secret from me. There were nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what her life was like. Did she live nearby? Did she think of him as her hero, the way our kids did? The thought made my stomach churn. How could he compartmentalize his life like that? Did he ever think about me, about us, when he was with her? One night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, searching for answers I'd never find. There he was, smiling next to me at our 10th anniversary dinner. His arm was around my waist, his eyes bright with what I thought was love. But now I couldn't help but wonder, was he thinking about her that night? About the child he'd fathered and kept hidden from me? Therapy helped in small ways, but it didn't provide the magic fix I desperately wanted. Our therapist encouraged us to focus on communication, to rebuild trust one step at a time. But how do you trust someone who shattered you so completely? Every time he said he loved me, I felt a pang of bitterness. If he truly loved me, how could he have betrayed me so profoundly? One session stands out in my memory. It was late, and we were both emotionally drained from weeks of counseling. The therapist asked him to explain, in detail, why he kept the secret for so long. I didn't know how to tell you, he said, his voice breaking. I was scared. I knew I messed up, but I thought if I told you, I'd lose everything, our marriage, our kids, the life we built. I kept telling myself I'd find the right time, but that time never came. I couldn't hold back anymore. So you thought the right time was 7 years later? I shouted, tears streaming down my face. You watched me live a life for 7 years while you played dad to someone else. Do you have any idea what that feels like? He didn't answer. He just sat there, his head in his hands, and for the first time, I saw the weight of his guilt. It didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made me angrier. Eventually, I agreed to meet her. It wasn't because I was ready or because I wanted to. It was because I realized that if I ever wanted to move forward, whether that meant staying in the marriage or leaving it, I needed to face the reality of the situation. The day we met was one of the hardest of my life. I remember driving to the park where we'd arranged to meet, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked the car and saw them standing there, my husband and a little girl with dark hair and wide, curious eyes. She was beautiful. I don't know what I expected to feel in that moment, anger, resentment, maybe even disgust. But what I felt instead was an overwhelming sense of sadness. She was just a child. An innocent, wide-eyed little girl who didn't ask for any of this. And suddenly, all my anger at her disappeared. She was shy at first, clinging to her mother's hand as they approached. Her mother, a woman I'd never met but had spent countless sleepless nights imagining, gave me a cautious smile. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I nodded, unsure of what to say. My husband introduced us, his voice trembling. "This is..." He trailed off, looking at me with pleading eyes. "I know who she is," I said, cutting him off. I crouched down to her level, forcing a smile. "Hi there. It's nice to meet you." She smiled back, shy but sweet, and in that moment, I realized something important. My fight wasn't with her. She wasn't the reason my marriage was crumbling. That responsibility fell squarely on the man standing awkwardly to the side, the man who had betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster. Meeting her didn't magically fix everything, but it was a step. A painful, awkward, messy step toward something resembling closure, or maybe just acceptance. I started seeing her more often, slowly trying to integrate her into our lives. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to scream at my husband for putting us in this situation, moments when I wanted to walk away and never look back. But there were also moments of clarity, moments when I saw the bigger picture. She wasn't the villain in this story. Neither was her mother, no matter how much I wanted to hate her. The real villain was the lies, the years of deceit that had poisoned our marriage and left me questioning everything I thought I knew. So, where does that leave us? Honestly, I don't know. Some days, I think we can rebuild. Other days, I feel like I'm clinging to a sinking ship, trying to save something that's already beyond repair. I've learned that healing isn't linear, and forgiveness isn't something you can force. If I stay, it'll be because I believe we can build something stronger out of the wreckage. If I leave, it'll be because I've finally accepted that some wounds can't be healed. But one thing is certain, no matter what happens, I'll never let anyone take away my sense of self again. So, Reddit, what would you do? Have you ever faced a betrayal like this? Is there a path to forgiveness, or am I fooling myself by trying? Let me know if you want updates. This journey is far from over, but maybe sharing it will help me find some clarity, or at least some peace.